Hello and welcome to the Run Testers. My name's Nick, and in this video we're going to be talking about the brand new Garmin Forerunner 265 and 265S. Jane and I have been testing this watch over the last week, but without access to Garmin Connect yet, so it's not everything we've been able to test about it. But in the run test, we're going to talk through our early impressions of things like the new screen, how it affects battery life, the GPS and heart rate performance. But before that, we're going to dive into the design and talk about what's new about the Forerunner 265. So the Forerunner 265 is the successor to the Forerunner 255. It's a mid-range, multi-sport watch within Garmin's range. Although mid-range is probably not the right word anymore because the price has risen a fair bit here. It's now £430 in UK or $450 in US, whereas the Forerunner 255 Music was £350 in the UK or $400 in the US. And actually, the Forerunner 255 was a fairly big jump in price on the Forerunner 245. So over the last couple of years, the watch has got fairly expensive, and I think it's now sitting not that far away from the top-end models in Garmin's range like the 965 or the Phoenix range. As with the 255, there are two sizes of the watch, the 265 and the smaller 265S. This is the Forerunner 265. Jane has been testing the smaller watch. They both cost the same amount. There are two really big new features on the Forerunner 265 compared to its predecessor. The first is the AMOLED display. We saw this introduced with the Garmin Epix last year, which essentially was a Phoenix with a AMOLED display, and now it's being extended to the Forerunner range with the Forerunner 965 also launched today, having an AMOLED screen as well. It's obviously a very bright, vibrant display, has a little bit of an impact on battery life. We'll talk about all of that in the run test, but it is a significantly brighter display than the transflective memory and pixel display you had on the Forerunner 255 and Garmin's other Forerunner sports watches. The other big new addition here is a software one, in that the 265 is getting Garmin's training readiness feature, which launched with the Forerunner 955 last year. It's actually a one-stop shop that shows your readiness to train at any given moment based on things like your recent sleep, your recent training history. It's a nice color-coded stat that I really like. I think it really should have come to the Forerunner 255 myself as a software update, but now it's here as an extra incentive to upgrade to the new 265. You also got a new font used and some new watch faces on the Forerunner 265, which just changed user experience, although obviously the biggest change is the fact that you're now looking at an AMOLED screen rather than a memory and pixel one. There is also a change to the charger, which is still the same 4-pin design you find pretty much across Garmin's range, but the other end of that is now USB-C rather than normal USB. So you can use old chargers with this if you only have USB plugs, but if USB-C is becoming more common, and Garmin has changed its charger to reflect that, I guess. The Forerunner 265 will also measure running power natively from the wrist without the need for an accessory, as well as some running dynamic stats like ground contact time, cadence, and stride length. The rest of the design is similar to the Forerunner 255 range. You've got a lightweight plastic watch with those 5 buttons, which you can still use to navigate the watch if you don't want to use the touchscreen that is available now. Got all the same key sensors, including a barometric altimeter, and the GPS tracking includes its multiband option for the best accuracy available. It's got the same smart features with the access to the Connect IQ App Store, music storage, Garmin Pay, and then things like notifications and weather. And it's got the same breadcrumb navigation, which is just a pointer and a line you can use to follow courses rather than the full maps you will get on the top of the range Garmin watches from the 955 and up. Battery life has taken a hit, as you'd expect with the AMOLED display. Interestingly, on the stats I got from Garmin, the smaller 265S has a longer battery life than the larger 265, because I guess the smaller screen isn't sucking up so much juice. So in smartwatch mode, you'll get up to 15 days from the Forerunner 265S and up to 13 days from the Forerunner 265. And the GPS-only tracking mode, you'll get up to 24 hours on the 265S or 20 hours on the 265. Now, those are numbers without the always-on screen enabled. You're going to drop down to around 5 days of use in watch mode if you are using the always on screen. There's a fairly big drop off compared to the Forerunner 265. On watch mode, it's similar though. It's up to 14 days on the Forerunner 265, but you did get 30 hours of GPS only tracking on the Forerunner 255, so the AMOLED screen is shortening the amount of time you can use the GPS for. We'll dive into the battery life a bit more during the run test, talking about how things like multiband affects it, but in general, it's less battery life. You've got an AMOLED display that's brighter than the one on the 255, but the watch isn't going to last as long.
So the Garmin 265, it's here. I've done a bit of running in it. I wore it for a half marathon actually on Sunday, and I got it out of the box, just went for a run with it, and it was actually in kilometres, not miles, and I'm a mile runner, but I got a PB, so maybe that is the future. So I couldn't really, on that race, do you know what I mean, when you get to the mile markers and you lap your watch, because it was in kilometres, not miles, I couldn't really see how far out it was, but they did have a 5k, a 10k and a 15k marker, And I know when I got to 5K, it was pretty much bang on. It was like probably about 100 meters too soon, which you expect, don't you, in a race? So I was impressed with that. I then wore it. I went out with my Garmin Fenix and the watch, and they were buzzing at the same time. So GPS wise, I think it's super accurate. The main upgrade with this watch is the display, and it is so bright. So I think the 255 had a resolution of 260 by 260. The 265 has a resolution of 416 by 416. This is the 265S. So this had the resolution of 360 by 360, whereas the 255S has a resolution of 218 by 218. So they're kind of a bit pointless numbers unless you look at the two watches side by side, and this is so much brighter. Even when I wore it with my Fenix 7, it was so much brighter. When I'm looking at the two side by side in direct sunlight, in kind of gloomy weather, it is an amazing display. It is really bright. It's really beautiful. I think because of the display, its battery is slightly less than the 255. So it's 15 days battery life in smartwatch mode, and that 24 hours in GPS mode for the 265S. The bigger watch is 13 days and 20 hours. And I think normally you would find the smaller watch has less battery life than the bigger watch, but obviously the screen is bigger and it's brighter, so that it kind of explains why the battery life on the bigger watch is a little bit less. But I've really loved using it. It's touch screen, which I think we're seeing more and more from Garmin now. I've always been a bit like, why do running watches need touch screens? But actually it works. It's really nice when you're using it as a smartwatch. It's nice to have the touch screen, and it's super responsive. It's not kind of like one of these clunky, you wait in a few seconds for it to catch up kind of displays. It's really quick and it's really beautiful. I love how small it is, and I love how it feels on the wrist. The only point is that it's more expensive. It's $49. We're waiting to hear what it is in pounds, but that's a lot more. That's about £100, $100 more than the 255. So it is a little bit more expensive. I'm looking forward to doing more testing with it, but as I say, I wore it for the first time for a half marathon. I did a shorter run with it yesterday, and it was, just a recovery run, get my legs moving, and it was pretty spot on. It's got some smarter features that I know the other more expensive watches have, like the morning report, like the V4 sensor. But yeah, it is a lovely little watch, and it is so bright. I think if you have the 255, but if you have an older watch like the 235 and then you buy this watch, it's different. It is like the Epic screen, when you had the Epic screen on next to the Phoenix, and it just looks so much brighter. It is like that again. So I've been really impressed with it. I love a small watch as much as I love the big kind of Phoenix watches on your wrist. I think to have a little tiny watch like this is amazing. Like I say, first look, I will be doing a lot more testing with it. One thing to note straight out the box is that the charger is still the same. We're still using this little 4-prong plug, but the end of the charger is now the kind of lightning, not the USB. Doesn't really mean much, but I was a bit like, I need to go and try and find a plug socket that fits it. But again, most people probably won't care about that. That's just something I noticed getting it out of the box. Yep, I've got it in this white strap, but it comes in 3 different colours, I think. And yeah, I was really impressed by it. And side by side, you can already see how much, okay, the screen's not on, that's not fair. But you can already see, look how much brighter that is. It's so bright. It's a really beautiful screen.
So the Garmin Epix was my favourite new watch of last year across the board, and that really was all down to the bright AMOLED display. And it's a similarly joyous experience when you first look at the AMOLED display on the Forerunner 265. It's very vibrant, very crisp, really does elevate your day-to-day experience of using the watch, and it's just a really nice thing to have on your watch. The touchscreen also responds well, although the buttons are still handy for using during runs, and the watch in general is still very nice and lightweight and comfortable to wear for long periods. It's smaller than things like the Epix and the Phoenix, so those who want a really good sports tracker from Garmin with an AMOLED display now have this option rather than having to upgrade to the Epix, which is a much more expensive, heavier watch. It's also good that Garmin has got some nice watch faces to use here with the AMOLED display, and I think that's actually something the Epics could use a few more watch faces just to really take advantage of that bright display and make it more fun to use. But really, in general, you're getting the same great Forerunner 255 experience, just with the addition of a brighter, clearer display, which for lots of people, myself included, I think makes a big difference. The other new feature is training readiness, which I am a really big fan of. I think it's the best implementation of training analysis in a device you find on sports watches from any brand, really. It's just so clear and easy to understand. You've got the color-coded graph, you've got one quick stat you can look at and a quick bit of advice that you can use, or you can dive into more detail across the board. It's a great addition to the watch. I do think it should be on the Forerunner 255. That is a bit of a gripe I have, and it's a shame that it isn't coming to that watch, which is still going to be hopefully available as a cheaper option. But it was one reason I would suggest that it might be worth upgrading to things like the 955 and now 965. And now you don't have to. There is a cheaper watch that has Garmin's most useful bit of training analysis. On the runs I've done, so I've been out, I think 3 times outside of an indoor run as well. But on the outdoor runs, the GPS tracking has been solid. Yeah, really good. I've had it in multi-band mode. I've been using it against the Garmin Enduro 2 and just checking the GPS tracks after. And in general, it's spot on. Like, it's got me on the right side of the road. It's got me taking narrow turns through alleys really well. There are a couple of little wobbles, but overall, the GPS is very good, as you'd expect from a multi-band watch, and the pacing is nice and consistent as a result. And the other thing to say on GPS accuracy is it's taking a long time to lock on at the start of runs for me, which I've not come across on any Garmin multi-band watches before. So I'm hoping it's just a little bug that will probably iron out when I can connect it to Garmin Connect, that kind of thing. But yeah, so far it's taking like 3 or 4 times as long as the Enduro to lock onto satellites. So hoping that goes away quickly. Heart rate has been a bit more of a mixed bag. It's more or less what I expect from an optical heart rate monitor. Like, it's pretty good most of the time. It's never been terrible for like an entire run, but at the same time, on every single run, I've had periods where it's jumped, incorrectly, and on the indoor run, it read high for a stretch of a couple of minutes. It's things like that. And actually, when I did a strength workout with the watch, it missed a couple of spikes in heart rate entirely, or lagged well behind a chest strap monitor. It's okay, you can use it. It's going to guide you through runs broadly correctly. Most of the time it's in the right zone, at least, compared to a chest strap. But I do think you are going to get, every now and again, a run that's completely wrong. And then that might wreck your training analysis. And if you're buying this partly for the training readiness feature, I would always use a chest strap or an arm strap at least to get a more accurate or more reliable heart rate reading. Because the readings are pretty accurate on this. It's just occasionally it will just go wrong. And if it goes wrong for 5 minutes and has you a very high heart rate zone, suddenly that run is classed as an all-out VO2 max effort instead of an easy run, and then all your training analysis balances go thrown out the window. Also, the AMOLED display has been very bright and easy to read in all conditions here in the UK, so no concerns with that under sunlight or anything like that. So battery life is going to be a key concern with an AMOLED watch, as you'd expect. I've had the always on screen enabled the entire time I've been testing this, and I've been using multi-band tracking, so the most power-intensive tracking mode on the watch. So the first time I charged it, I wasn't really running much because I was a little bit injured. So it actually lasted through almost 5 days with very minimal activity. So it did hit that up to 5-day standard that Garmin suggests in the specs for the watch if you're just using it in watch mode. I started running a bit more the last few days, and like I said, I've done those few outdoor runs, and it's dropped about 30% over the course of about a day and a half. So that would still get you up towards 4.5 days, but crucially it's not yet connected to Garmin Connect, so you're missing out on all the notifications coming in, and that does drain a lot of power. And also I've not been running very much because I'm still coming back from injury, so my runs have only been about 20-30 minutes of length. So when I'm running normally, usually up to about an hour a day, I expect this would last me more like 3 to 4 days with the always on screen enabled using the multi-band tracking. Comparisons to like the Epics would last 4 to 5 days, or if I was using the Forerunner 255, when I tested that, I was testing the smaller version of it, the 255S, and that was lasting me about 6 days running about an hour a day. So you are going to see a drop off in battery life compared to the Forerunner 255, as you'd expect. But I think this is still going to be pretty usable. For most people, I think you're going to look at 3, 4, 5 days. If you're a triathlete going out and doing all your cycles as well, long cycles on GPS, then yeah, battery life might be more of a concern. But as a runner going out once a day, I think you are still going to be looking at 3, 4 days probably with the always on screen enabled. And that's kind of okay. It's still more than you're going to get from things like smartwatches. Overall, I do think this is an upgrade on the Forerunner 255. AMOLED screen and training readiness are two of the things I love the most about the Garmin Epix 2, and now it's available on a cheaper watch. I think it's a really good option for lots of people. And I do think it now really does offer a good, cheaper alternative to the top watches in Garmin's range. Like if you look at things like the Epix, the 965, what you're now paying to upgrade for is the maps and is longer battery life, and in some cases like really long battery life like the Fenix 7 and Enduro watches. If those aren't a big deal for you, this is just as good a watch really, and it is still significantly cheaper than something like the Forerunner 965, which is around £600 or $600. If you do want those maps or long battery life, then the upgrade option is still available, and there is still an option to get a much cheaper watch in the Forerunner 245 or 255, which do match up really quite well well with the 265 on all the essentials of run tracking, especially the 255, which has multi-band GPS as well. It's going to last you a little bit longer. You're getting pretty much everything else than you get on this watch, aside from the training readiness, which might not be a big deal for lots of people. And obviously you lose the AMOLED display, which again, might not be a big deal for lots of people. I do think it's a quality of life improvement for day-to-day use on the watch, but it's not absolutely essential. And certainly on the run, the AMOLED is less of a factor, I think. For me, it makes much more of a difference outside of running, just having a nice looking watch on your wrist to engage with constantly throughout the day. So I definitely hope that the Forerunner 255 in particular sticks around in Garmin's range for a long time. It's a shame it doesn't have the training readiness feature, but it does still offer a very good, cheaper alternative to the 265 if you're aghast at the idea of paying this much more just for a bright screen on a running watch, which won't be a big deal for lots of people I know. And then comparisons to some other stuff out there, obviously you've got this now smartwatch style screen. This is still not a full smartwatch that rivals things like the Apple Watch, mainly because it just doesn't have that big app store or the general convenience of use you get from the Apple Watch out there. You're going to get better native sports tracking for sure on the Garmin, and obviously much better training analysis. There's no real training analysis on the Apple Watch. There's not even anything particularly good from third-party apps. But if you do want a proper smartwatch, the Apple Watch Series 8 is a little bit cheaper than this, and the run tracking is really quite good now through the native app, and there are excellent third-party apps you can use to create a similar experience to what you get from a Garmin, just by maybe working a little bit harder to assemble a couple of apps on the watch, and then you will still lose that training analysis, like I say. Overall, I think this is a really good watch. I'm excited to do loads more testing of it. It is now a nice, cheaper alternative to the top watches in Garmin's range that has nearly all of those features and the bright AMOLED display. But the big price rise does mean that there is certainly a lot of value, I think, in still looking at those older Forerunner 245 and 255 watches. Lots more to come on all these topics in our full review. So that's it. That is our first look at the Garmin Forerunner 265. We'll be back for our full review. There'll probably be a couple of other run testers involved in that who are getting the watch. So let us know what you want to know about the watch for our full review, what watches you want it compared to in particular, and we'll endeavour to do that. Please do like, subscribe, ring the little bell, and we'll see you next time.